So it wasn't long before another theme started to ricochet in my soul at the time, and it had to do with God's goodness. I know that lots of folks were praying for me while I was in the hospital, thanking God for sparing my son and myself, and asking that we would both recover emotionally and physically, and specifically that my kidneys would turn back on. But something happened in the dialysis center that, upon further reflection, turned out to deepen our understanding of God's goodness more than we could have ever imagined. I remember sitting in the center wondering if dialysis 3 times a week was going to be a normal part of my life rhythm, just like it was for many of the folks that were sitting in the dialysis center at the same time. And as I sat there for hours while my blood was getting cleaned, with Leanne, my wife, next to me, something extraordinary happened to both of us at the same time. I remember we both talked about this. We said, well, why don't we pray? And we got 3 to 4 hours here. Why don't we pray? But we did pray, but we didn't specifically pray for healing, which is a little odd because praying for God to heal us and heal family members is kind of a normal part of our prayer rhythm and a regular part of our life. But this time, as much as I wanted my kidneys to start working, I didn't feel, nor did she feel compelled to pray specifically for my kidneys to be healed. I looked over at the others for whom dialysis was a normal part of their life, and I wondered, well, why not me? If my kidneys never started working, would that change the way I viewed God's goodness? Would somehow he be less good because my kidneys didn't start working? And so in that moment, both Leanne and I were simultaneously flooded with peace and contentment in God's goodness, period. That his goodness would not be in any way impacted by whether or not my kidneys would turn on, that he would answer a particular prayer to have them healed. And then my thoughts immediately went to the first Bible verse I learned in my life. And that Bible verse was the first verse I learned in my life because my parents, as they taught us the scriptures, would teach us, as we learned the alphabet, they would teach us a verse that started with the same letter in the alphabet. You know, so like if you were to say G, I would say, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. Or if you were to say, J, judge not that ye be not judged. It was King James back then. So whatever letter it was, there's a verse that immediately comes to my mind. So the verse A, which was the first verse, was this, Romans 8:28. And it would usher in peace that met me and my wife right where we were. And it says this, and we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. And we know, not that we doubt or we think, we know that all things work together, not some things, that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. And I remember as a young kid growing up, knowing that verse, that when my dad was incorrectly incarcerated by Manuel Noriega's secret police in Panama, I heard my dad give testimony after that 3-day ordeal in front of the whole church afterwards, talking about how God did great good in his soul, in his life, because of that 3-day ordeal that he had to depend on God for everything, because he had no idea whether he'd ever get out. And then I remember my mom giving testimony when we were in Bolivia and she was bleeding internally and they couldn't get her to a doctor in time and she felt life slipping away and she begged God for life and God stopped that internal bleeding. And then she talked about how it made her a better wife and a better mom because she felt like God, God healed her and gave her a second chance to live beyond. And my parents lived it and they talked about it. And when stuff would happen in God's hands, all things work together for good. Even when the circumstances aren't good, he'll make it good in his kingdom way. They passed it on to me and I'm passing it on to my kids.